The airport was bustling with activity, its energy palpable as travelers hurried along polished floors, rolling their luggage through the crowd. The air was filled with the sounds of hurried footsteps, muffled announcements over the intercom, and the occasional bursts of laughter from families embarking on new adventures. Among this sea of passengers, Zara Bennett stood out, not by intention, but because of the quiet confidence that radiated from her. Zara, a young black woman, was dressed impeccably in a sleek outfit that suggested effortless elegance. She stood with a calm composure, clutching her first-class boarding pass in her hand, her heart racing not from uncertainty, but from the anticipation of what this flight represented. It was more than just another trip. It marked a monumental moment in her life, a celebration of new beginnings, new challenges, and a hard-earned scholarship to study in the United States. The exclusive first-class lounge where she found herself was a haven of luxury. Plush leather chairs, ambient lighting, and the soft strains of jazz music created an atmosphere of calm and privilege. Travelers around her sipped on complimentary lattes, read newspapers, and typed away on laptops, all seemingly lost in their own worlds. Zara, however, was lost in hers, the one that was about to take flight. Her father, Victor Bennett, the owner of the very airline she was about to board, had always been a humble man. Zara had grown up admiring how he treated everyone with equal respect, whether they were the cleaning crew or high-level executives. He had taught her that no one was above anyone else, regardless of their status or wealth. In fact, not many people knew that Zara was his daughter. Victor valued his privacy and kept family matters well under wraps, a value Zara had adopted. As Zara scrolled through her phone, a message from her father appeared. "Let me know when you're settled," it read. Zara quickly typed back, "Almost there, I'll text you once I'm on the plane. Everything's fine." She glanced out at the tarmac, her thoughts momentarily drifting. She hadn't been home in over 2 years, having spent that time studying in another state. While she cherished the independence that distance had given her, she couldn't deny how much she missed her family, especially her father. This trip was more than just a flight back home. It was a chance to reconnect, to reflect on how far they'd come, and to celebrate a new chapter in her life. But what Zara didn't expect was the challenge she would face on this journey, an encounter that would forever change how she viewed people's biases and assumptions. Across the lounge, Claudia Harper, the lead flight attendant, stood near the service counter, talking with her colleague. Claudia's sharp features were framed by her tightly wound bun, and her gaze often held an air of superiority, especially when she looked at certain passengers. Zara was one of them. "First class is getting too accessible," Claudia muttered under her breath, a smirk crossing her face. Her colleague laughed nervously, but Claudia's words hung in the air with unmistakable judgment. It was clear that Claudia didn't believe certain passengers, like Zara, belonged in a space reserved for the wealthy or proper class. As Zara made her way to the gate, adjusting her carry-on, the tension of the moment was palpable. She joined the first-class line, where Claudia, now stationed at the entrance to the plane, greeted passengers with a practiced smile, scanning their boarding passes and offering polite words of welcome. But when it was Zara's turn, something changed. Claudia's smile tightened as she scanned Zara's ticket. Her eyes briefly flickered with skepticism, yet she managed to maintain a professional facade. "Economy is just down the aisle," Claudia said, her voice laced with condescension as she gestured to the back of the plane. Zara blinked, her mind struggling to process the words. "This says first class," she replied softly, holding up her ticket for Claudia to see. Claudia didn't falter. "There must have been a mistake. Please head to economy," she insisted, her tone polite but dismissive. The passengers in the economy line behind Zara began shifting, sensing the growing tension. Zara felt a pang of disbelief, but her voice remained steady. "There's no mistake. This is my seat in first class." Claudia leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a hushed, almost threatening tone. "I don't want to cause a scene. Please just go to economy so we can keep things moving." The words stung like a slap. Zara felt the weight of the humiliation settle in her chest. The whispers of passengers grew louder, their eyes following her as though she were an intruder. They were silently judging her, assuming she didn't belong in the space she had every right to occupy. But Zara wasn't one to back down. With quiet resolve, she stepped past Claudia, making her way down the aisle to her assigned seat. As she walked, she could feel Claudia's gaze burning into her back, the air thick with unspoken animosity. Zara reached her seat and placed her carry-on in the overhead bin, adjusting the window shade just slightly. She settled into the plush first-class seat, the soft leather contouring to her form, offering a moment of calm in an otherwise tense situation. Moments later, Claudia entered the cabin, her heels clicking against the floor with purpose. She stopped by Zara's row, her expression neutral, though her eyes flickered with barely concealed irritation. "Excuse me, young lady," Claudia's voice rang out, firm yet polite. "First class is reserved for paying passengers." Zara blinked, momentarily stunned by the bluntness of the statement. She glanced down at her boarding pass, then back at Claudia. "I am a first-class passenger," Zara replied steadily, her voice unwavering. "Here's my ticket." She extended the pass to Claudia, fully expecting the matter to be resolved quickly. But Claudia didn't take the ticket. Instead, she crossed her arms, her face contorting into an expression of thinly veiled disbelief. "I don't think so," she said dismissively. "Step aside while I handle this." The humiliation was almost unbearable. Zara stood frozen for a moment, uncertain how to respond, as the whispers around her grew louder. The murmurs from economy passengers filled the cabin, some filled with pity, others with judgment, and all of them judging her based on nothing but assumptions. What would you do if you were in Zara's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you believe that prejudice has no place in any part of our society, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Despite the weight of the moment, Zara refused to let Claudia's actions define her. She refused to let her prejudice win. With a final glance at the flight attendant, Zara settled back into her seat, ready for what would surely be a more complicated journey than she had anticipated. And little did Claudia know, this was just the beginning of the consequences of her actions. Claudia didn't stop there. She took a step forward, her voice growing sharper, almost like a challenge. "Let me see your ticket again. Are you sure you didn't accidentally take someone else's pass?" Zara's hands trembled slightly as she held out her boarding pass once more, her breath steady despite the heat building in her chest. "It's mine," Zara said, her voice quiet but firm, her resolve starting to take shape in the face of this blatant disrespect. "This is my ticket," she added, her words deliberate, as if to assert her right to this space. Claudia raised an eyebrow, her tone laced with doubt. "Your father, you said? And where is he now?" she asked, her voice dripping with disbelief. "He's waiting for me at our destination," Zara answered calmly, her pride never wavering. Claudia scoffed lightly, glancing around, almost as if looking for validation from the other passengers, seeking reinforcement for her disbelief. Zara felt a knot of humiliation tighten in her chest, but she refused to let it consume her. She was here for a reason, and Claudia's prejudice wouldn't change that. Claudia hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking between the ticket and Zara, clearly trying to process this information. Finally, she snapped, "I'm going to need to verify this," she said curtly before turning on her heel and striding away. Zara sat motionless, her heart pounding in her chest. The knot of humiliation only grew tighter. Around her, passengers whispered. Some looked at her with pity, while others wore expressions of quiet judgment. It felt as though the entire cabin was watching her, waiting for her to slip up, to show weakness. But Zara had learned the hard way from her father. Never let others see you fall apart, no matter how they treat you. Still, it was difficult to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. She breathed deeply, grounding herself in the values her father had instilled in her. She was Zara Bennett, daughter of Victor Bennett, a man who built an empire with his own hands. He had taught her that respect was not something to be earned, it was something no one could take away from her, no matter how they tried to demean her. As Claudia walked away, Zara stood alone, the sting of isolation sharp as her cheeks burned with embarrassment. Passengers continued to glance her way, their murmurs growing louder. A few even exchanged knowing looks, silently affirming Claudia's actions. Moments later, Claudia returned, her presence almost triumphal. "Excuse me," she began, her voice louder than necessary, a performative edge to it. I need to ask you to move to the economy section. This seat has been assigned to someone else. It's not for someone like you." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Zara calmly reached for her boarding pass once again, holding it up for Claudia to see. "But this is my seat," she said firmly, her voice unwavering despite the tension. "How can it be assigned to someone else?" Claudia crossed her arms, her professional mask slipping as a hint of frustration edged her features. "If you don't comply, I'll have to escalate this. I'll call security." Her words were icy, her patience clearly running thin. The tension in the cabin thickened as the passengers fell into a hushed silence. Zara met Claudia's gaze, her determination clear. She wasn't about to let Claudia's blatant prejudice win. This was her seat. Her right to sit here was indisputable, and she wouldn't be silenced. Whispers rippled through the cabin like wildfire. One businessman leaned toward his companion, muttering, "Looks like someone's trying their luck." Across the aisle, an older woman frowned, shaking her head. "This doesn't seem right," she murmured, though no one moved to intervene. Not everyone, however, supported Zara. A man seated several rows back muttered dismissively, "Well, if she doesn't belong here, the attendant has every right to question her." Claudia, determined to assert her authority, took the final step. She called for security. Minutes later, 2 officers boarded the plane, their presence immediately amplifying the tension. They approached Zara's seat, their expressions professional but firm, eyes scanning the situation. Zara, ever composed, calmly explained the situation, showing them her boarding pass. "This is my assigned seat," she said, her voice steady as she defended her right to sit where she belonged. But Claudia's narrative had already taken root. One of the officers, his voice low but firm, addressed Zara. "Ma'am, we've been asked to escort you to another seat," he said, his words devoid of empathy. Zara's voice didn't waver. "This is my seat. I've done nothing wrong." She held her boarding pass out again for the officers to see, her words carrying the weight of her right to be there. "I have every right to be here." The officers hesitated, glancing at Claudia for confirmation. She nodded sharply, her expression a silent affirmation of her unjust actions. "Her seat is in economy," she said, her words final, carrying the force of a verdict. Despite Zara's protests and the validity of her ticket, the officers, unwilling to challenge Claudia's authority, escorted Zara to economy. The whispers followed her down the aisle, the passengers' gazes filled with a mix of judgment and curiosity. Zara's posture remained straight, her composure unbroken, though the humiliation was impossible to ignore. She moved to the back of the plane, each step a reminder of the injustice she was enduring. Back in first class, Claudia returned with an air of victory. She walked through the cabin, her voice deliberately loud, ensuring everyone could hear. "That's how you handle troublemakers," she said with a satisfied smile, glancing around at the passengers. "First class is for people who belong here." Zara, now seated in economy, couldn't escape the sting of her words. As she settled into the cramped seat, she noticed the looks she was getting from the other passengers. Some were indifferent, others sympathetic, but a few had smug expressions on their faces. It was clear they had sided with Claudia. In first class, Claudia continued to gloat, unaware that her actions were anything but professional. "She doesn't even look like someone who belongs in first class, but she thought she could just walk in and claim it," Claudia boasted, loud enough for nearby passengers to overhear. "It takes experience to see through that kind of nonsense. I had to put her where she rightly belongs." Some passengers chuckled politely, others exchanged uneasy glances, sensing that Claudia's comments were far from professional. Zara, however, did her best to ignore the remarks, her pride and dignity her shield against the cruelty she had just endured. Seated in economy, Zara held her head high. Her first-class ticket, the validation of her right to sit there, now felt like a cruel joke. But she would not let this moment define her. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed a message to her father. "Dad, they moved me to economy. The flight attendant claimed my seat was a mistake." Victor Bennett's reply came almost instantly, concise and filled with reassurance. "Stay calm. I'll handle it. Let me know if anything else happens." Zara stared at the screen for a moment, drawing strength from her father's words. She took a deep breath, slipping the phone back into her bag. She would wait. She knew her father's intervention would come, but for now, she would keep her composure. Later, as she stood to stretch her legs and head toward the bathroom at the back of the plane, a soft voice caught her attention. "I saw what happened earlier." Zara was touched by a woman's kindness, her words offering comfort. "If you need anything, just let me know," the woman said. Zara smiled softly, appreciating the empathy. "Thank you, but I'll be okay." Meanwhile, Claudia was in first class, still gloating about her actions. She spoke loudly to her colleagues, boasting about putting Zara in her place. Some passengers chuckled, but others exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the cruelty in Claudia's words. Unbeknownst to her, the tension in the cabin was building. Claudia's confidence began to slip. The realization that Zara was Victor Bennett's daughter shattered her facade. She moved slowly, her usual sharpness replaced by anxiety. With each passing minute, the weight of her actions bore down on her. She fumbled through her duties, her hands trembling as she tried to serve refreshments. Passengers noticed her unease. Zara remained calm, confident that her father, Victor Bennett, would intervene. As the flight continued, Claudia's anxiety grew, consumed by the looming confrontation with Victor. The captain summoned her, informing her that Victor had been notified about the incident. Claudia's confidence evaporated, and she realized the gravity of the situation. She approached Zara, trying to offer drinks and snacks, but Zara, sensing Claudia's insincerity, declined. Finally, Claudia apologized, but Zara made it clear that the matter was now in her father's hands. Upon landing, Victor Bennett arrived with executives, his presence commanding attention. He approached Zara with concern, reassuring her. Then, he turned to Claudia, who was now trembling. His calm but firm words addressed her unprofessionalism. "The issue is not whether you knew she was my daughter, but how you treated her, and likely how you treat others." The cabin fell silent before breaking into applause as Victor continued. "This airline was built on respect and dignity. Your actions today failed those values." He ordered Claudia's immediate removal from duty, and passengers whispered in approval. Zara felt a quiet sense of vindication. In the following weeks, Victor introduced new diversity and respect training within the airline. Claudia, reflecting on her behavior, recognized the unfairness of her actions. She wrote an apology to Victor, expressing remorse and a desire to change. Victor, seeing sincerity in her words, offered her a second chance under probation. Claudia returned to work, determined to prove herself, and over time, her colleagues noticed her transformation. She became more empathetic and respectful toward every passenger. Victor also publicly addressed the incident, emphasizing the importance of inclusion and respect. His words went viral, sparking conversations about prejudice and accountability, marking a turning point for both the airline and Claudia. For Zara, the experience made her stronger and more self-assured. With her father's unwavering support, she learned the power of standing up for what was right. Weeks later, when she and Victor boarded another flight together, the change was evident. The crew was more respectful, and Zara, empowered by the transformation, smiled, knowing standing up for fairness had been worth it.